Right. Let's dive into a really perplexing case this time. The disappearance of Christina Morris.
Yeah.
It's one of those that, just grabbed national attention, and we're going to sort of try to unpack it step by step to see, how investigators, they use all these different techniques, surveillance footage, even things like trash analysis
Right.
to try to uncover the truth. So it's a real detective story, and, by the end, I think you'll see how it all unfolded and also the impact that it had on on the legal landscape.
Yeah. What makes this case so interesting is that it really kind of pushed the limits of what you can do with a kidnapping prosecution. I mean, it really made everybody rethink how much weight you can put on circumstantial evidence when you don't have the victim.
Yeah. So let's start with the basics. What do we know? So it's August 2014 in Plano, Texas.
So,
Christina Morris, she's a young woman, lives in Fort Worth. She goes out with friends for a Friday night, just a typical night out at the shops at Legacy. But then this night out takes a really dark turn. Christina just vanishes. And then the search for her becomes this, tangled web of like conflicting stories and weird behavior, and then ultimately some forensic breakthrough.
right, right. And what makes it even weirder is that the shops at Legacy is a busy area. This
Yeah.
isn't some secluded spot.
Right.
So you've got witnesses, you have security cameras, and still she just disappears.
Yeah. And adding to that mystery, the last interaction she had that anybody knows of was with this former classmate, Enrique Orochi. They were seen walking together towards the parking garage early morning hours.
Right.
But his story and the evidence, they just don't add up.
Right. So the first thing the investigators do is they focus on two guys, her boyfriend, Hunter, and then Enrique. Hunter, because they had a fight earlier that night.
Yeah.
And of course, Enrique, because he was the last person team with her. So they start looking into both of their stories, seeing if anything doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Those first few hours after somebody goes missing, they're so critical.
Mm.
And in this case, it was the boyfriend's reaction, or really his lack of reaction, that really raised some red flags. 3 days passed, and he hadn't even reported Christina missing. He just assumed she was with family, which seemed odd to the investigators, especially because, the relationship wasn't exactly perfect.
Right.
But at the same time, Enrique's story also wasn't adding up.
Yeah. At first, he told police they walked to different parking garages. But then this is where good detective work comes in. Investigators, they go through hours of footage, all this surveillance footage from around the shops at Legacy, and they find something.
They found something, yeah. What did they find?
Footage of Christina and Enrique entering the same parking garage,
Oh, wow.
which goes against what he initially said. It might seem small, but investigators, they're looking for anything that doesn't line up in his story.
Right, right. And that's not all they found. They found there was even more incriminating footage from inside that parking garage.
Right. So they see Enrique's car leaving. But Christina's car never leaves. This is a big moment because it pretty much means that she didn't leave the garage in her own car. So the only way she could have left was in Enrique's.
Okay, yeah. That's definitely suspicious. So what did Enrique say about all this?
He said that he had been drinking that night and that his memory was fuzzy,
Mm-hmm.
but he still insisted that she was never in his car. And, you would think if he was innocent, he would want the police to search his car just to, clear his name.
Right, exactly, yeah.
But that's not what happened. He lets them see the car. But it's suspiciously clean, like as if he knew they were coming and tried to get rid of any evidence.
Ah,
This is another red flag for investigators.
yeah.
He's acting like somebody who's guilty, showing consciousness of guilt.
Oh, consciousness of guilt. Okay, so what does that mean? In a legal context, what does that mean?
Basically, it means doing things that suggest you did something wrong. It's not like a confession, but it makes you look guilty. Think about it. If you really didn't do anything, why would you go through all the trouble of cleaning your car, especially when you know the police are looking at you?
Yeah, it makes sense. But they still couldn't just go search his car without a warrant, right?
They needed more evidence to convince a judge to give them a warrant. So they got creative. They did some good old-fashioned trash analysis.
Wait, trash analysis. So, like, they're going through his garbage.
Exactly. And here's where it gets really interesting. They started taking his trash every week. And in one of the bags, they found a Post-it note. Seems harmless, right? But this note had a list on it. And this list changes everything.
A list. Okay. I got to know what was on this list. What was so important?
A list of things he wanted to get rid of. Things like black shirt, text messages from August 29th, which is the night Christina disappeared, bank statements, cell phone bills. It's like he was giving them a list of evidence to destroy.
Wow. That is a big aha moment for investigators.
Right.
It sounds like he was trying to cover up his tracks for sure. So, so where did they go from there? What did they do?
They used that list. They looked at his bank statements from around that time,
Yeah.
and there's a transaction at a gas station the morning after Christina vanished.
Oh, interesting.
So they get the security footage from the gas station.
Yeah, and I bet that footage was pretty revealing.
It was. You see him filling up his gas tank, which seems normal enough. But then he gets a squeegee, the ones for cleaning your windshield,
Mm-hmm.
and starts wiping down the passenger side door handle and the trunk latch. Like really carefully. Think about that. He's focusing on the places that might have evidence,
Yeah.
more consciousness of guilt.
Yeah, that definitely raises some red flags. Who does that, right? I
Mhm.
mean, it just seems like he's hiding something.
Exactly. And the investigators thought the same thing. This footage, plus the Post-it note, that was enough. They got their warrant to search his car.
Okay. So they finally got to really examine the car. I bet that was a long wait.
It was. And they brought in the CSI team to go through it. Now, remember that gas station footage?
Right.
The CSI lead used that. She focused on the trunk latch, especially the rubber seal around it. Her thinking was, if somebody was trying to force something heavy, like a body, into the trunk, it might have touched that seal, leaving trace evidence.
Wow. That's some pretty impressive thinking there. You know, sometimes the smallest things can be so important. So what did they find on that seal?
They ran a blue star test on it, which can tell if there's blood. And guess what? It reacted. And not just that, the test also reacted to the trunk mat. So now they know something happened in that trunk.
Wow.
So they sent the swabs for DNA testing to see if it was a match for Christina.
So now it's just a waiting game for those DNA results. That must have been a really tough time.
It was. But while they were waiting, something totally unexpected happened. Christina's boyfriend, Hunter, got arrested
Hmm.
by federal agents on drug charges. And this actually ended up clearing Hunter as a suspect. The agents confirmed that they had been talking to him the whole night she disappeared. They were setting up a drug deal. He even sold drugs to an undercover officer that night. So he had a really solid alibi.
Wow, what a twist. So now the focus goes entirely back to Enrique. And then just a week later, the DNA results came back from his car.
And they were a match for Christina. No doubt about it. It proved she had been in his trunk.
Wow, finally some concrete evidence. But there's still this huge problem. Christina's still missing. How do you prove a kidnapping without a victim to testify or a body? It had never been done before in Texas.
And this is where Zeke Fornberry comes in. He's a prosecutor. He knew this case was unlike any other. But he saw a way to get justice. He focused on what he could prove, that Christina was taken against her will.
Okay, so how was he going to convince a jury of that? I mean, what evidence did he have?
Well, he had some things. First, there was the cell phone data. It showed where Enrique's car went after leaving the parking garage. And here's something important. The data shows he drove away from the shops at Legacy, but then made a U-turn. Went back towards the area.
Why would he do that? That seems out of place.
Right. It suggests that maybe something happened in the car. An argument, a struggle. Maybe Christina tried to get out. We don't know for sure. But it's suspicious. And then there are those injuries on Enrique's hands that the police saw when they first interviewed him.
Right, the scratches and the bruises.
Exactly. Zeke thought those could have come from a fight with Christina. And then there was the dent on his car, another piece of the puzzle.
Okay, so they've got the DNA, the phone data, the injuries, the dent. It all sounds pretty bad. But how do you present something like a dent to a jury so they really understand? Pictures don't tell the whole story.
Right. Zeke knew that the jury had to see the dent for themselves. So he did something pretty unusual. He asked the judge if they could take the jury to see Enrique's car. A field trip? Wow. What was the point of that?
He wanted them to have the same experience he had when he saw the dent, to see it up close and get a feeling for what might have happened. It was a bold move, but he thought it was necessary.
Yeah, I can see how that would be a lot more powerful than just looking at a photo. But was there any other evidence that could show that Christina didn't go with Enrique willingly?
Yes, there was. Zeke talked to Christina's family and friends, and they all said she was really afraid of the dark.
Oh, okay. How did that help the case?
Zeke used that. He argued that if she was so scared of the dark, there's no way she would have gotten into the trunk of a car, especially at night. It wouldn't make sense. So she must have been forced in there.
Yeah, that makes sense. It makes it seem even more unlikely that she went willingly.
Right. And there was this one detail that kept bothering Zeke. He couldn't figure out how it fit in. There was a signal from Enrique's phone in a town called Anna, Texas, the day after Christina disappeared.
Anna, Texas. Wait, didn't he mention that during the trial? He did. In his closing argument, Zeke brought up that phone signal. He even walked right up to Enrique and asked him what he was doing in Anna that day.
Wow. That's like something from a movie.
It was. Zeke didn't know for sure what happened in Anna, but he made it clear it was important, that it was a piece of the puzzle. He wasn't directly accusing Enrique, but he was planting a seed, making the jury wonder if there was more to the story.
It's like he was giving them a clue, leaving it to them to figure it out.
Yeah.
That must have had a real impact on the jury.
It did. And with that question about Anna, Texas, Zeke left the jury to decide Christina's fate.
So the jury's out, right, deliberating, weighing the evidence. It's a big moment because, like we said, this is new ground, in Texas at least. To get a kidnapping conviction without a victim to testify or even a body?
Right. It all came down to the circumstantial evidence that Zeke presented. Could he convince the jury that even without a body, Enrique kidnapped Christina?
Yeah. For Christina's family waiting for that verdict, I can't even imagine. I mean, they had been searching for answers for so long.
The pressure must have been immense. The whole country was watching. And the verdict, it would set a precedent, not just for Christina's family, but for other kidnapping cases too.
Yeah. And after 2 days of deliberations, the jury came back with a verdict.
Guilty. Enrique Orochi was found guilty of aggravated kidnapping. It was a landmark decision. Zeke Fornberry did what a lot of people thought was impossible. He got a conviction based on purely circumstantial evidence.
Yeah, wow, it's a real testament to, Zeke's skills as a prosecutor. But even with the guilty verdict, a life sentence, for Christina's family, that loss is still there.
Of course, there was relief. Justice was served. But it wasn't complete. They still didn't know what happened to Christina, where she was.
Yeah, I mean, they had a conviction, but they didn't have Christina.
Right. And this is where the story gets even more, unexpected. Remember all that development happening around Dallas-Fort Worth? New neighborhoods popping up everywhere.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like every time I visit, there's something new being built.
Well, in 2018, one of these new developments was going up in Anna, Texas, the same town Zeke mentioned in his closing.
Wow, it's like that town was always going to be part of this. So what happened there? What happened in Anna?
They were clearing the land, for this new housing development, and a worker, he was just walking the field, making sure there weren't any obstacles, just routine stuff.
Yeah, I can picture it.
Yeah.
So what did he find?
A human skull. He found a human skull. He called the police right away, and they found more remains, some clothing too.
It must have been a really difficult moment, knowing that this could be the end of their search.
They did DNA testing on the remains, and the results confirmed it. It was Christina.
It's a tragic ending, but at least her family got some answers, some closure.
They were able to have a funeral for her, celebrate her life and mourn her loss. It was a moment of, sadness, of course, but also peace. They could finally bring Christina home.
And what about Zeke? What was he thinking when he heard the news?
Well, by that time, Zeke had left the DA's office. He was focusing on civil law, helping victims. And he got the call from the detective saying they found Christina in Anna, Texas.
The place he talked about during the trial, that's incredible. I must have felt like, I don't know, confirmation, like his instincts were right.
It was a strange moment for sure.
Yeah.
And, it gets even weirder. Zeke actually helped with some of the volunteer searches for Christina. And some of those searches took him to Anna.
You kidding? So he was searching in the area where she was eventually found. Wow.
Yeah. He said he was, unknowingly, about half a mile from where her remains were.
It's amazing and sad at the same time. It makes you think, what else is out there?
Right. It does.
Yeah.
Sometimes the answers are closer than we think. But even though we know what happened to Christina, her story, it continues.
So what happened with Enrique after the conviction? And how did the case, change Zeke in the long run?
Well, Enrique, he always said he was innocent. He appealed the conviction, said the evidence was circumstantial.
Yeah. But with the DNA and everything else, I can't imagine that went very far.
It didn't. His appeal was denied. And he's still in prison.
And what about Zeke? Did he stay in touch with Christina's family?
Oh, yeah, they stayed close. They went through so much together. Even after Zeke went into civil law, he stayed in contact with them. They became friends.
That's really something. It says a lot about Zeke. He wasn't just a prosecutor. He really cared about Christina and her family.
Absolutely. And his time as a prosecutor, it showed him the limitations of the system. He saw how it focuses on punishing the criminal, but sometimes forgets about the victims. That's why he switched to civil law. to help victims get compensation and have their voices heard.
So now, instead of putting people in jail, he's helping victims recover. It's like balancing the scales, making sure they're not forgotten.
Exactly. He sees civil law as a way to give victims power, to help them rebuild their lives. His journey from prosecutor to victim's advocate, it really shows how much this case changed him.
Christina's story, it's really something. It's about loss and justice and, the human spirit. We saw how hard law enforcement worked, how much the volunteers cared, and a family that never gave up hope. And Zeke, he was a champion for them. He made a real difference in the legal world and in their lives.
It shows that even in the darkest times, there are people fighting for what's right, for the truth.
So let's think about what we've learned. This wasn't just a local story, it became a national one. It made people talk about kidnapping laws, about circumstantial evidence, and how hard it is to prosecute these cases when the victim is missing.
Right.
It also showed how important community involvement is, and forensic science, and people like Zeke who dedicate themselves to getting justice.
Yeah. So as we wrap up, we want to leave you with a question. How do you think cases like this shape our understanding of justice? What can we learn from Christina's story? And how can we use those lessons to make the legal system more fair, more compassionate?
We hope you'll keep thinking about this and share your thoughts. But for now, we'll leave you with Christina's memory, a young woman whose life was cut short, but whose story continues to inspire.
It's hard not to think about all the people affected by this case. It wasn't just about a crime, it was about the people.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the dedication of the police, the volunteers, the family never giving up, and then Zeke, helping to bring some kind of closure. It's pretty remarkable.
Definitely. And it raises some big questions about our justice system. It challenged the idea of what you can do in a kidnapping case, showing you can get a conviction even without the victim there or a body.
Exactly. This case, it really set a precedent, changed how we think about circumstantial evidence. You can tell a story with the facts, even without the usual proof you'd expect.
It's amazing how Zeke was able to do that, put all those pieces together, the phone data, the gas station, that Post-it note, the dent in the car. It all added up to a clear picture for the jury. He was innovative, for sure. And it opens up the possibility of doing the same in other cases where there isn't much direct evidence. It's about understanding the situation, the person accused, and telling a convincing story.
And then remember that part in his closing argument when he brought up Anna, Texas? Out of nowhere, it seemed.
Yeah.
Almost like he knew something.
It's pretty eerie, right? Knowing now that's where they found her, like he had some kind of, intuition about that place.
Yeah, it shows how important it is to follow your gut, in an investigation. Even the tiniest detail can be a big clue.
And the role of science, too.
Yeah.
That CSI team, they were so careful, focusing on that trunk latch just because of the gas station video. And that led to the DNA match, proving Christina had been in the car.
Yeah, it's amazing. And then there's Zeke and how the case changed him, going from prosecutor to, fighting for victims' rights.
Right. It really affected him. He saw how the system can sometimes miss the bigger picture. The victims, their needs. That's what led him to civil law.
So instead of punishing people, he's helping those who've been hurt.
Exactly. He sees it as a way to empower victims, to help them get back on their feet.
Christina's story, it's really powerful. It's a story about loss, about justice, about the strength to keep going. We saw the incredible work of law enforcement, the compassion of all those volunteers, a family who never gave up hope. And Zeke, he was there with them every step of the way. He fought for them, made a difference in the legal system and in their lives.
It's a reminder that even when things are really bad, there's still good in the world. People fighting for what's right.
So as we wrap up, I hope you've learned something new. This wasn't just some local story. It made the whole country think about kidnapping laws, about what counts as evidence, and how tough it is to get justice when someone is missing.
It also showed how important it is for everyone to get involved. The community, the scientists, people like Zeke who want to make things right.
We'd love to hear what you think. What do you take away from Christina's story? What can we learn from it? How can we use it to make the world a little bit better?
Yeah, keep the conversation going.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll leave you with the memory of Christina, a young woman taken too soon, but whose story will never be forgotten.